refrigerant to this yesterday. Had to get some dye. A little thing of dye here, right there. Basically, I had the system. So just in a day, I can't get this compressor clutch to come on after I put some refrigerant in it yesterday, which means it's leaking pretty badly somewhere. So I'm going to add this dye, UV dye, to the system. This is just a little AC Pro line. Add to the low side. It only fits the low side, so you can't really get it wrong. And it's about 1.7 ounces. I know this isn't going to overcharge it, so I'm just going to run this in. Put some dye in it. Hopefully. Oh, there goes the compressor, so it's right on the edge of just having enough refrigerant in it to get the compressor to come on. So now the compressor's running. I'm going to add this dye to it, see if we can figure out what's leaking. I ran dye in this, and hopefully you can see this. I don't know, I think you can. Look at the glowing green streak on the back of that compressor. Back here. Get this to focus maybe. Maybe just back it up a little bit. It's hard to see. I can't tell if you're going to get a good shot of this or not. If you can see that. So you see where the lines connect to the back of the compressor right there, and you can see how that one O-ring, it's just you can't see the O-ring, but on the well, I don't know what side that would be to you, but as you can see on the back of that compressor where the connection is, there's a couple O-rings in there that looks like one is definitely leaking pretty badly. That's why the system's emptying out. So this is going to have to be evacuated. It's going to be taken apart, and probably a new O-ring will probably fix that. It definitely looks like there's an O-ring leaking on the back of it. So we're down onto the car here. Looking at the back of the AC compressor, that's what's leaking. So we're going to, up in there, let's see, up in here, those two lines going into the back of the compressor, that's what's leaking. So we're going to take that off. And normally I'd have to empty this system or take it to somebody, take it to my mechanic actually, who has a recovery machine. I don't have a recovery machine for refrigerant. You're not allowed to just vent it into the atmosphere, but this is leaking so bad that after I put the dye in there and found out where it was, and in the next couple of days there was nothing left in the system. It all leaked out. That's how bad it's leaking. So we're going to pull that connection off the back, and I'm going to go through putting new O-rings on that and some sealant that I'll show you in a little bit here, and then put it back together, and then we'll evacuate the system, pull a vacuum on it, make sure it's not leaking, and then we'll recharge it. Disconnected the hose connections to the back of the compressor where it was leaking, and I have these two old O-rings, and I just want to show you them real quick. The two old ones here, and two replacements. So I'm going to put these back on, new ones back on, and torque that back down, and then I'm going to put the system, hook it up to a vacuum pump, and pull a vacuum on it. And then I'll let it sit for at least half an hour once it pulls a vacuum to make sure it's not leaking, and then I'll recharge it if it's not leaking. If it's leaking, I have to find another leak, but I don't think that anything else is leaking. I think it's just this. I just wanted to show you one additional thing. I highly recommend, and I did some research and found that this particular type of leak on the back of the compressor with these O-rings is pretty common, and there's a lubricant sealer made for air conditioning systems. This is the blue. This is what there's a blue and a red. You want to use the blue. It's called Nylog. It's made specifically for this, but everything I'm reading about it says if you don't want to leak, this is the stuff to use. It doesn't harden. It's an elastomer. So we're going to put a little bit on that on the O-rings before we put it back together, and hopefully we'll never have a leak on this car again. Okay, I don't know if this will focus for you, but right there are the fittings. Connection block that goes on the back of the compressor, and you can see the two pipes and where the O-rings go out on the end of those. I'm going to put sealer on the O-rings, put them onto the connection block, and then put it back together. And I'm going to torque that bolt actually there. It's just one bolt, hooks both hoses. Is supposed to be 31 foot-pounds. I'm really not a torque Nazi. A lot of people get really bent out of shape about getting exact right torque. On this, it matters, so I am going to torque this with a torque wrench to 31 foot-pounds. Put the new O-rings in with the sealer on them. You see that bolt in the middle there. Hopefully this is not blurry. Can't tell. Torqued it to 31 foot-pounds. And we're going to go up and pull a vacuum on it and make sure it's not leaking before we recharge it. So it's been about half an hour, and let's see if I can show you this here. I don't know if you can read that or not, but it has not leaked down any vacuum at all, which is what we want to see. Still pulling about 28 inches of mercury, so that's great. It means there's no leaks in the system, so now we're going to recharge it. So normally in a system that you were doing a partial fill on, you'd use the gauges to get the pressure readings you need, and you would fill the system based on where your pressure gauge is read on the high and low side. But this system, since it had to be opened up and evacuated, it's completely empty of refrigerant. And that tag says 2 pounds of R134A, so we don't have to use the gauges to fill this system. We're going to do it by weight. We know this system's completely empty, so we're going to fill it with 2 pounds of refrigerant. I've got this electronic charging station here for air conditioning, which will actually, I can tell it how much I want in pounds, ounces, kilograms, and it will actually put that into the system. And since the system was completely empty, it was evacuated, I know that it needs 2 pounds. So I'm going to use this to put 2 pounds into the system through the low side, always through the low side, and this will actually do it for me. As far as measuring it, it'll stop when it puts 2 pounds in there, and it'll get just the right amount in there. So we've got that all set up. You don't have to have one of these. I've done these without this. You can do it through a can. You just have to either use the whole can and keep track of the amount that you use, or weigh the can before you start and know when you're done how many ounces you put in by reweighing the can and doing the math. But either way will work. So that's what we're going to do. This is under vacuum right now because we evacuated it. It's holding vacuum very well. It's not leaking, and hopefully I'm going to run half the amount into this system. I'm going to run 1 pound first, and I'm going to run it for a little bit to make sure. That should be enough to make the compressor come on, to make sure that it doesn't leak. I don't want to put 2 pounds in there and have it all leak out. So I'm going to put 1 pound in, enough to get the compressor to run, let it run for a little bit, make sure it's not leaking, not losing any refrigerant. The system already has dye in it, so I don't need to add dye. If I needed to add dye, I could either have a canister which has dye in the refrigerant, or I use these little cans here. Just a little can of R134A in this for this car with UV dye in it. I'll run that in it first if I need to. So we've added 2 pounds of refrigerant to the system. Run it. We'll check it over the next half a day or so. Make sure it's not leaking. Where it was leaking for before, I already checked. It's not leaking. I don't expect to find any other leaks. I hope not. That seemed to be the only place that was causing an issue. Now the reason that was so difficult, and this compressor was replaced probably a year ago, not by me, by somebody else. It's not an OEM compressor, it's aftermarket. The O-rings, I'll show you, between the manifold and the air conditioner compressor have a metal ring with an O-ring inside. They're bonded together. There's enough variance in the aftermarket compressor. There's an inset. These have to set into the back of the compressor, and it's just big enough to hold the O-ring and let the O-ring slide in. The aftermarket compressor, the O-ring on one side couldn't fit in it. Just enough difference that it wouldn't fit in. I'm surprised that it didn't leak right from the beginning, but obviously it didn't, but it eventually did. And when I pulled the original O-ring out, it was deformed because it wasn't in there correctly. I had to actually modify the new one and grind it down a little bit around the edge so it would fit into the recess. And after doing that, it sealed right up, which is what we want, basically. So we shouldn't have any future problems with this. Air conditioning in itself is not easy. I've been doing this not professionally, but I've been working on cars for 31 years. I do air conditioning, but it can be very tricky. I've been fortunate to have some really good mechanics around me that I know very well who have taught me a lot about air conditioning, about cars in general. So this is not, topping off your air conditioning system is one thing. It takes specialized equipment when you're getting into it in any more detail. It's not something for the average DIY person. It can be very complicated, and a lot of recognizing what is going on with the air conditioning system just comes from experience and from being around them and doing them over and over and over again. You get a much better feel for what is actually happening when you look at air conditioning systems. I hope you enjoyed this. If you do have the equipment, it's something you can do. If not, maybe this gives you a little better idea of what's going on with your air conditioning system, and when you take it to somebody, you'll have a better idea of what needs to be done and just have better knowledge to understand what's been done to fix it. Hope you enjoyed it.